Is XRP Ripple actually the best chart in cryptocurrency land? Well, the short answer is yes, and it has been for quite some time. And the long answer is probably not going to matter if Bitcoin shits the bed. But today's focus will, of course, be on the big four, that being XRP, Solana, Ethereum, and Bitcoin in that order. We'll be looking at everything versus XRP. I just think it's the more interesting of the bunch here, at least in the short term. And we'll also be comparing everything versus XRP as well. Anyways, before we get into it, I should let you know that we still have a little bit more time in our current sale, the 7-year sale, the 7-year anniversary of this channel. You can get any one of the programs or services in the Teachable link in the description below for 20% off if you use the code YEAR7, year in all capitals, and then the number 7. And then you can even actually try several of our indicator packages for completely free for the first 30 days with the code TRIAL in all capitals, TRIAL, TRIAL, again, in all capitals. And that will apply to the Quant Prime AI. That'll apply to Caretaker's full indicator bundle suite, completely new as well. The Quantum Wave Bands, which essentially are a nice little scalping tool, and also price going to be going up on that probably within the next month. And then the VMP over here as well. You can try those all out for the first 30 days for free. There's no fucking hidden cost, no hidden agenda or nothing like that. If you like it, keep it. If you don't, then never pay a fucking penny, and all good. Anyways, let's start it off here with XRP. I need to get my notes in the background going as well. And I wanted to point out that as far as the majors go, and when I refer to the majors, I mean, the high market cap coins, XRP has a significantly different chart than all of them. Maybe a little bit less so in comparison to Bitcoin, but even then it is stronger than all of the other major charts, meaning that if we see any sort of upside pop on Bitcoin, I would look at XRP as one of the ones to benefit quite greatly. And looking at the 5-day time frame, looking at the weekly time frame, you can see that XRP is still above all major moving averages. None of the other majors can say that. In fact, most of the other majors are below almost all major moving averages. Not necessarily the best sign of strength, of course. So I do look at that as just relative strength and overall good. But I don't think that XRP is going to move to like new all-time highs or have like a real breakout here, unless we see the rest of the market do it as well, namely Bitcoin. So I suspect that it's still going to be tethered to that. But if Bitcoin gets moving, I think XRP is probably one of the best bets here, to be honest. Again, I don't say this as like an XRP army person or an XRP lover or any shit like that. Like my name on Twitter is an XRP soldier 6952, but I'm gonna call a chart in the way that I see it, for better or worse. And of course I could be wrong in it as well. But looking at XRP, I do like that. On top of that, we can see that the 5-day time frame hasn't just reclaimed all major moving averages on yesterday night's closure, so it's completely fresh. But we also see the 5-day stochastic oscillators have a real chance to turn up here, playing out yet another test of this long-term regression on the 5-day momentum, and it will actually turn up on the next closure in 4.5 days, to be fair. If XRP can remain above 219, right now trading nearly 20 cents above that, which is a nice little buffer. Of course, a lot can happen in 4.5 days, but if we do see this one once again turn up, well, all of the prior tests along this trend line have correlated with, well, pretty important higher lows. We see this one right here before the last mega breakout. We see this one during the last prior consolidation, small pop following after that, and then we see, of course, this one over here, where same thing essentially, small pop into a greater consolidation, all building up to this massive response over here. So again, XRP, as long as it's above 219, I favor XRP amongst all the other majors. If we go to the monthly here, it's the only monthly chart that still sees momentum continuing to point to the upside. This one is pivoted at 170 now, so that's quite far away. And while I say all of this on the higher term timeframes and generally have a positive view of this, I think there's a very obvious area where all of what I'm saying would just be completely nullified and well, and get ready for some significant downside. And that would obviously be if XRP trades anywhere below February's low, especially if it closes below there, even on like a daily time frame, I would look at that as tremendously problematic. And speaking of the short term, that is actually a little bit different than those higher term timeframes, because the short term is in still a corrective consolidation posturing. We can see the daily time frame is confirming a drive of hidden bearish divergence there on the last local high. Yes, XRP's come down a little bit since then, but I would still err on the side of caution in the very, very short term, meaning that, I could easily see XRP coming back down somewhere around like 220 or so, but does that really destroy anything? Not really. Again, as long as it's above February's low, it's the hardest one to hate of the majors. But like I said, if Bitcoin ain't moving to the upside, I don't think this one will as well. It's just it's positioned incredibly well if Bitcoin were to. So let's get into Solana now. Solana, we will also compare versus XRP directly, but first we'll look at just Solana spot price action. And I do want to point out that still similar to the last essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 closures on a 5-day time frame, which is 25 days. Yeah, so similar to the last essentially month of analysis that I've been having on this one, I'm still looking for a bounce off of this lower boundary here. This can take a lot of time. Already it, fucking has, obviously. But I still favor a bounce here. Again, just by the virtue of getting to these last prior major lows throughout the past year, and also seeing that the current move is really abruptly losing its own momentum. 5-day time frame, stochastic oscillator is going to be pointed up actually on the next closure, which is not coming again for another 4.5 days. Unless it will cross up if Solana just remains basically here or higher or anywhere above 125.5 or so. We will see that cross up. So it should be good enough for at least a pity bounce. I believe we also saw the double extreme here read that I typically look for on the daily BBWP. Indeed, it was right here and right here. And that has essentially marked off the low before, a nice sideways consolidation. And I still think that this one bounces higher first before likely going lower later. I do think that Solana at some point will see sub 100, but this period can take a long time, a very, very long time for Solana. But just a general rule of thumb here, as long as Solana is seeing monthly momentum to the downside, I'm not going to be bullish on it, basically. The current pivot for March is 248.5. I have a hard time seeing Solana even get above 200 this month, to be honest. I think if you're going to see any sort of move towards 200, it's going to be a ways away from now, but or at least into April. But here's the thing, Solana could easily bounce up to anywhere between 140 to 160, and that would be completely fine. It'd play out a short-term time frame bounce, and ultimately it'd still be another lower high on pretty much any time frame that matters. And so not only would I be generally, cautious and skeptical and just generally bearish as long as the monthly stochastic oscillator is positioned to the downside here, I would even go as far to say that as long as this thing's below the March highs, it's high, it's certainly the weakest of the big four, and it's the one that's, most in a heavy downtrend at this point as well. So that would kind of be the number to beat. Or again, if we saw the monthly reclaim that momentum pivot, which is actually significantly higher than this. So you can also notice that this high is actually in alignment with the 200 simple on the daily as well. So, good area around that 180 cent. Again, Solana can bounce up, decently from where it's currently at, still put in a lower high. In fact, somewhere right around here would be perfect. As long as it's below this high right here, nothing. I don't think that there's anything really to be getting excited for. And still, over the long term, I do think that lower prices are more likely, unless if Solana can really level out here, not break below the current low, and hold it for 3-4 months. Okay, that would look pretty good, but we're well and far away from that as of right now. So I'd err on the other side, at least for the moment. Now let's look at Solana versus XRP. So this is XRP as a denominator and Solana as the numerator. And you can see that XRP has absolutely fucking crushed Solana since November of 2024. Overall, I do think that this one will trade a little bit lower, meaning that XRP will continue to gain versus Solana, but it is very likely going to find a major low very soon, somewhere down around here. Keep in mind, this is a monthly chart, so this can take many months to play out. But, I would be expecting a big bounce somewhere if and when it does retest these prior lows here, which I do think that it very likely will in the coming month or two. And then you're very likely in for a bounce, meaning that Solana will gain versus XRP, but this is a pretty nasty downtrend no matter which way you kind of cut it. So it would be the same thing as Solana versus USD. It's like, look, you're in a fucking heavy downtrend right here. Even if it does bounce, which it very likely will, it's almost a guarantee that it will off of the mid to low $30 region. That bounce is most likely to be another lower high. It could bounce all the way up to 80, nearly 50% higher than where it's at right now. And that's still a downtrend. That's still bearish, still bad, quote unquote. Anyways, so that's Solana right there. Let's go to Ethereum now. Ethereum. When I said that Solana was the weakest of the big four, maybe I should say Ethereum, honestly, just because it's the only one that has not made new highs this cycle and is already below its 2024 lows. So, maybe I take that statement back. It actually applies to Ethereum. Ethereum is the biggest loser. Sorry, I know a lot of people love Ethereum. Again, when Ethereum has a great chart, I'm going to love it as well, but it hasn't been that way for the past few months since it lost that structure, namely below about 3,000 in February. That was the big one. Anyways, yes, so Ethereum here, I do want to point out that similar to a lot of the other majors that we've seen today, this one on the lower time frames, I do think is setting up for a bounce here. Does it retest this low that you saw from March 11th at around 1,800 or so, or 1,700? It's very possible, but ultimately, I don't think you're going to be closing on significantly new lows. I do think this is a bounce region, whether it's from exactly where it's at right now or a little bit closer to that official low. Either which way, I do think that you are going to be seeing, a decent bounce attempt here. But just like the other ones, it's very, very hard to love as long as Ethereum is below the last trending lower high, which is 2550 or so. That's from the early March rally, like on March 2nd. And then, of course, the other sort of major thing that we've been keeping an eye on this channel that has been keeping us also safe from, being optimistic on Ethereum is the monthly stochastic oscillator. This one's had so many chances to cross the upside over the past nearly year now. It failed every fucking time, no matter how good the Ethereum chart, was hinting at a breakout and looking like, it's ready. This one continued to remain to the downside, and Ethereum would always miss that pivot. The next pivot for the end of March is going to be 2691. I have a hard time seeing Ethereum get above there within the next 9.5 days. Not saying it's impossible. It's just I'm not personally betting on it. You can do whatever the fuck you want, of course, but yeah, looking at this here, Ethereum very likely getting ready for a bounce. That bounce, might even be a pretty decent one. Could bring it all the way up to, I could easily see 23 to 2400, but that's where you would be expecting another lower high in the series of lower highs that seems to never fucking end. So there's that. Longer term, I do think that Ethereum probably makes one more new low closer to like 15 or 1600. That hopefully should be it for Ethereum. I mean, hopefully, look, it doesn't matter to me. I don't fucking own this thing, but yeah, it's hard for me not to see this thing coming down closer to 1500. Maybe in the next couple months. If it's going to happen, I would suspect it happens in the next couple months. But does it get a bounce first? Probably, yeah. Anyways, looking at XRP versus what's it called, Ethereum. We can see XRP has had a tremendously massive rally since beginning of November. That's when XRP really started to explode and has hit a pretty significant level here. This is the same swing high rejection that we saw from November of 2020, and also the big breakdown level that we saw from the 2019 base over here. So this on a first pass, yes, it's bullish. Yes, long term, this very likely does break out above. But on the first pass, I'd be looking for this one to pull back. This is a weekly time frame. This can take some time. This is going to take some time. It can spend some time around the highs for a while, but then I'd be looking for a pullback into a higher low. Higher low could come anywhere around here theoretically, or let's actually draw a nice retracement. Yeah, anywhere above the 50% level, which is right here actually. It's fair game to me on a pullback, but I'd just be looking for a higher low. I do think that this one will, given enough time, break out to new highs, but I don't think it's on this move right here. Also, now that I recognize that the monthly time frame has seen extremes on volatility, so the probability of this thing continuing from this exact moment, above these major areas, I do think is significantly less likely. Again, long term, I do think that this one is going to break out. So it's very possible I could be wrong on the short term, but I'm always going to bet on a pullback, on an area like that. Not always going to be right, but it's going to be the right decision more often than not. Anyways, yes, okay, we got that. It's time to end on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is what probably most people come here for, but as you imagine from yesterday to today, very little's changed. We did see another 5-day and 10-day closure for Bitcoin. Looking at the HPDR, I don't see anything of significant difference right here. The 5-day range is still going to be continuing between about 8,700 to the upside, or sorry, not 8,700, 87,000 to the upside versus 75,000 bucks to the downside. I don't have a strong inclination on which side gets tested first. I don't fucking know, but I do see some compelling things in the background here now with the HPDRO. So if you recall, we were bringing this up over the past couple weeks now as significant because the HPDRO representing directional volatility has gotten down to this red line that I drew in here, which is essentially -50 on this oscillator. And anytime that we've seen this level or lower in the past couple of years since this bull market began, these have all correlated with these red vertical bars here. So they've all been around, like very, very close to, in terms of price, the actual low. Some of them actually literally coming on the low, but many of them coming, on the first drive to the low. And then Bitcoin, takes another month or two to really spend its time consolidating before moving up. I mean, this one over here, again, very close to the actual low. In hindsight, would have been very, very happy buying around 56,000 bucks, but of course, it still took like 3 months for it to get going after that. So it's not a call to action at this exact moment, but we are seeing not only one, that this level has been hit, so that same level has been hit, but two, with yesterday night's closure, we see that the HPDRO now has a positive slope. The moving average on it also has a positive slope, and the HPDRO plot is above that moving average. So, if this... Basically, what I'm trying to say is that if you're bullish, this is the low, and you really shouldn't be expecting much lower than where Bitcoin's got already. I could maybe see it going down to like low 70s, but we really would not be expecting like anything more than that. I mean, if it did go down to low 70s, I imagine this indicator would print some divergence here. So, I'd still look at that as overall good, but if you're bullish on Bitcoin, if you don't think that the cycle has ended, you're effectively saying that this area here within, a few percent probably is the low, which I think is a fine argument to be having if I want to put on the bull goggles, completely fine. It's just, depends on your positions, of course. If we go to the 10-day, same thing, by the way, 10-day HPDRO, obviously a little bit less sensitive here, but getting down to a similar level that we saw from the 2024 correction when the lows were put in. And then also similar areas, comparable levels to what we saw on the bear market cycle lows right here. So, Bitcoin probably going to have at least a decent bounce from this region. If you're bullish, it should be the low, and it should be essentially sideways and up only after that. If you're bearish, well, you're looking for rejections, of course, on Bitcoin anywhere below the 6th of March high, which is almost 93,000 bucks as of current. That's again how to be managing this one. I'm essentially still leaning bearish in the short/medium term, expecting another try at the downside, whether it creates a higher low or a slightly lower low or the same low. I don't fucking know, but I do have to lean bearish as long as Bitcoin is below, again, that high from the 6th of March. And where would I get like super bearish on Bitcoin? I don't know. If you start closing dailies below like 68,000 bucks, that would look pretty fucking bad to me, but we'll get to that one if and when it does happen. For now, I still think that there's hopium is still, I still think that it's logical to cling on to some hopium for this cycle. But at the end of the day, if you're a trader, just fucking trade. Who cares? Who cares what direction it's going? I mean, that's kind of the way that I see things anyway. So yeah. that's where we're going to end it for today. As always, I want to wish everyone the best of the best. Take care, much love. And of course, if you want more content like this in the future, the best way is to like and subscribe, because it will have the YouTube algo promote the content directly to you instead of hiding it, which might be of your interest. If it's not, then all good as well. Anyways, take care, much love, and see you tomorrow.